channel. Today we're going to do a little get ready with me while I talk about some things that I learned caring for betta fish and some tips and tricks that I have to start you off on the right foot. So back here I have my 10-gallon tank, and to the left of me I have a 5-gallon tank. This one has nothing in it. This has Mr. Tapioca in there, right down there. One of the first things I did when I was thinking about getting a fish was I did a ton of research. I looked through vet articles, Reddit, everything you can imagine, I looked through it. One of the most helpful things, honestly, was Reddit. As much as sometimes the Reddit community can be very hostile towards you when you ask for advice and post pictures of things, it was helpful to get the advice side with a little kinder people. So it kind of depends where you look. Your turn. I looked on Reddit. I did look for very basic things as far as what kind of temperature they need, pH, size tank. A lot of that is really important, and you wouldn't think it is, but I've noticed huge differences in my fish's behavior as far as 5-gallon to 10-gallon. So the first thing I did was make a list in my notes about what I needed and what all I needed to buy from the store. And my biggest thing was how to keep the water where it needed to be as far as the level of pH, temperature, nitrates, ammonia, all of it. It sounds so much harder than it is. The biggest piece of research that really helped me was an ecosystem tank. Has saved me so much time. So instead of doing the little tanks with the fake rocks and the fake plants and all these things, I decided to go with a natural ecosystem-based tank, which meant live plants, aquatic soil, different things to create an ecosystem. So I went to the pet store and I got all of the things in my list: an aqua soil, a lot of live plants, substrate. I bought a 5-gallon tank to start with, and my 5-gallon tank did come with a kit. I would highly recommend getting a kit to start with. Your heater, filter, light, lid, all those things that you would need. The kit was still on the pricey side, but it definitely helped a lot in saving costs of buying individual items. I feel it was cheaper to start with the kit. So what I did was I put the substrate in my 5-gallon. I planted up my plants. I got some hardscape with some wood, some natural wood, and filled it with water, turned everything on, and said, all right. This was pre-buying my fish. Do not buy your fish where your tank is set up or cycling. I left the tank cycling for about 2 weeks, and I went to get my water tested, and they told me that the water quality was just not ready. I believe water was too hard, and there were some other things wrong with it. I live in an area with just not good water supply. To be honest, if you live somewhere where the water is just not great or you need to filter it constantly, buy the pre-conditioned aquarium water for your tanks. Or my secret hack is buying the gallons of water at the store and using those for tank top off and just adding in the water conditioner, because the quality of that water is much better than what comes out of my faucet. It makes water changes so easy. What I've been doing is, instead of buying the pre-conditioned water, I've been buying the water jugs that you can just buy at Walmart, the dollar store, anywhere. And every time I've taken my water to get tested, it's been pretty much in perfect parameters with that. So instead of spending $13.99 on 2.5 gallons of pre-conditioned water, you can get like 13 gallons of water because they're only like $1.50 a piece. Pre-conditioned water, I did a 50% change when I took it to get tested, and the water quality was much better after that. And they said basically once I do a 50% change, I could let it cycle a little and then I'd be ready for my fish. I did just that. I let it cycle and got it tested again. Everything was good, so I did bring home my fish. His name was Finnegan. He was the cutest little fish ever, and he was so pale in the face and so white and lost color, and I decided I wanted to take him. So I brought him home and I got him all his colors back, and he was doing great. Now, this is where my advice comes in on some things that I could have done pre-getting him to make sure things were going to be successful when I did bring him home. I would highly recommend buying an antibiotic, a parasite and bacterial lift for your tank before you even bring a fish home. I would keep it on hand at all times, because especially pet store fish come home with ick, dropsy, all sorts of diseases, swim bladder, you never know. I should have looked more into fish illness before I got him. However, part of what happened was he was sick. I knew he was sick. I was trying to find out what was going on. Someone told me that he had ick and that she had seen it at the pet store all the time. He had ick. Treat him for ick. I did. He did not have ick. I knew deep down that he did not have ick. So I was treating him for the wrong thing for several weeks. I do believe he had dropsy, and I believe his medicine helped, but I was not treating for the proper thing. I probably needed to fast him. There were a few things that I should have done that I did not do because I thought someone that was qualified was telling me otherwise. So I would keep aquarium salt, a bacterial and parasitic medication on hand at all times, just in case. I wish I had treated him with those medicines immediately after getting him as a preventative measure. Definitely treat your fish with some sort of microbe lift to make sure what they have is cut and nipped in the bud if they have anything starting at all. I should have done that. It was something I learned the hard way about fish keeping, and unfortunately, since he did have dropsy for so long, it did get the best of him, unfortunately. So I share these things to make sure people don't have to go through what we went through. The aquarium salt is very beneficial for things, but I would start them with a little aquarium salt before you even put them in their tank, because the aquarium salt can kill your plants, your live plants, and it's not really good for your tank. So you have to do it in a separate tank anyways. Aquarium salt does not evaporate, so it's going to stay in your tank for a prolonged period of time. Eventually, that does get to your plants and things don't go as expected as far as your plants go. To be honest, starting with a 10-gallon probably would have been optimal. I probably should have started with that instead of starting with a 5-gallon. I've noticed he was so much happier in his 10-gallon. Regardless of his illness, I could tell his 10-gallon gave him a much better sense of freedom. I think there are fish that would do great in the 5-gallon. I do plan to put one in a 5-gallon, but I may put a smaller species of fish instead of a betta fish. I haven't decided yet. I'm kind of thinking a shrimp tank. Looking back, I do wish I started my tanks with more plants because I did not realize how much he loved to hide in those plants. So when I refurbished into the 10-gallon tank, I did add more, which I saw was a vast improvement in his behavior. I feel it gives him a much more natural environment compared to having a lot of empty space in the tank. Even with his, I want a few more plants on this side. Yeah. Up in here, I do want a few more plants in there just to give him a little more security, but it seems he's very happy in his tank. One thing I definitely wish I could do over was learning which species of plants actually go in the water, because the pet store's really good about just selling you things and not telling you what goes where. And so I bought some plants, the little white and green ones that are supposed to be toppers, and I put them in the tank. Well, of course they started dying, and I was wondering why they were dying. So I took them out, went to the pet store, and got some new plants that looked like they were better fit for underwater. So I would check which plants are toppers and which ones are not. The biggest thing that made it easier for me was getting a siphon to do the water changes and getting a bucket. I was just scooping out the water because I had a 5-gallon. Once I got the 10-gallon, I was like, I need to make a change. So buying just a little siphon, it was probably $9 the most, has made a huge difference as far as water changes go. The benefit with your ecosystem tank is, for me, a water change is I take some out and I add some right back in. There's not a whole lot I have to do for a freshwater tank. I feel it's very self-sustaining. You can check for bacteria. You can see it's like little worms that go in there. They look like little worms. It's a good sign of good bacteria. My huge piece of advice is do not buy the plants in those big tanks that they have, especially at a Petco and PetSmart. They have a lot of aquatic plants in those big giant tanks full of water. Do not buy them. I bought a few, and now I still have a snail infestation months and months and months and months later. It took so long for me to get the population down, and I still have them. I have changed the water and cleaned everything in this tank so many times at this point. There's just no getting rid of them. It's not possible at this point. If you can avoid buying anything in that tank, do so. You will be just fine without whatever's in that tank. It was probably one of my biggest mistakes, to be honest, was doing that, because now I have snails everywhere. I don't know where they come from. I don't even know how they're reproducing, because they're all not even, they're like the size of a grain of sand. I don't even know how they reproduce at this point, but they do not leave. So avoid the big tank of plants. Buy the tube ones that say they're snail free. I think my big checklist for getting a fish is to make sure you get a tank kit. It saves you a little money. That or go on Facebook Marketplace. I could have gone on Marketplace and gotten a cheap one as well. Go on Marketplace. You have a heater, filter, a fish tank light, a thermometer strip. Make sure you have hardscape, live plants, and if you don't want live plants, get silk. They have to be silk. The plastic ones will cut their fins, but make sure you're doing no plastic plants. I would also make sure you have aquarium salt, the microbe lift, make sure you have water conditioner, plant fertilizer, pH up, a water testing kit. However, the water testing kit could be optional unless you don't want to go to Petco every Hey! If you want to go to Petco every 1 or 2 weeks, I would make sure you get a water testing kit. They are a little pricey, I'm not gonna lie, but so is fish keeping. I have in my shelf down there 2 bins full of fish stuff. It has everything I've previously listed, as well as some little starter bacteria balls that I use for a new tank that I like to put in, and I take it out when the fish goes in. Also, a side scraper for algae is really helpful, or some sort of sponge to make sure you're keeping the sides clean. My favorite things I added to my tank was little plants that are beta toppers that go in my filter. I feel like I haven't had to change my filter nearly as often. It seems like my tank is staying cleaner for longer. Maybe I'm making it up, but I think they look nice too. I do have some in this tank as well that are just in the water, as well as one is in the filter. The things that I really could not work with that was in the tank kit was the heater. The heater was way too small, so I had to go buy a new one. Heaters are not the cheapest things in the world. They're definitely a pricey item that you can buy. However, it's very worth it. You really only have to buy it once, especially if you can get a good one. You won't need to replace it often. I have not replaced any of mine other than the ones that were too small that came with the kit. I do have 2 heaters in my tank. I have one that is a 15 watt, I want to say, and one that is a 5 watt. It's been so long since I bought them, I need to look at the package again, but I have them, and one is a big flat heater and one is one that's about that long. I have both in there because when it's colder outside, I feel like both those heaters really need to be on, but when it's warmer outside, I can unplug the small one, and then the big one takes over and heats everything just perfectly. So I feel having the little extra control over the temperature changes is very beneficial, because you do want your tank between, 75, 80 degrees to make sure it has that tropical temperature. Also, this seems like it would go without saying, but really and truly it's not. A lid on your fish tank is incredibly important. Having a lid is a really good security measure for your fish. Betta fish are jumpers. They will jump out of their tank, and when you think they won't, they will. So get a lid. The reason that this one doesn't have a lid is because there's no fish in it, and I also broke it, so I have to buy a new one. That being said, don't leave your lids on the ground when you do stuff. That's common sense, but I didn't do it. So don't do that, otherwise you may step on it and break it like I did, and I had to go hunt down a new lid. I would look into the tank kits that have lids that are replaceable. This one, you can buy the lid by itself over and over again, so if I break it, then I can buy a new one. But the 5-gallon kit that I got, I can't find a lid anywhere that fits this tank. So I'm thinking this tank may have to go, and I may have to get a different one, because I have no lid that fits it. I have searched the internet far and wide to find a square 5-gallon tank lid, and they're all either very, very expensive because they're custom made, or they don't exist. So to be honest, this tank might be changing, and I might upgrade it to like a 6-gallon, 6.5, so I can get another lid. My favorite little creatures that I have in my tank are snails. I think they're great little docile companions for betta fish. However, sometimes betta fish don't like them and they like to beat them up. However, I've had luck with both of mine being super chill about snails. I just turned the light off and introduced them into the tank before my fish, and he gets along with them great. Both of them have got along with them fantastic. Deciding to skip on eyeliner. I'm not about to fight that battle. I do think for other species that you would like to put as companions in your tank, you will need a bigger tank for that. Snails, you can put quite a few in your 10-gallon tank. However, the like tetras, things like that, will need a much bigger tank, so you may need like a 20-gallon, a 30-gallon to have a big community tank. If you just want like some bottom feeders, things that will eat your algae, things like that, snails are a great idea. The mystery snails, I've noticed, don't really reproduce at all, so they're not causing the infestation. I believe they're bladder snails is what I have. When you notice them, start kicking them out. They can overload your tank at some point. For a while, they're not really a threat, especially if you're keeping the population under control. However, if they're constantly repopulating and you're not getting rid of them, eventually you're going to like bio-overload your tank and it won't be able to handle it. I think my last thing that I would highly recommend is a fish tank light timer. I have his on a timer, so his is up and going when I get up in the morning. I have his going on at 5:30, which is when I wake up for work, and I typically snooze a few times, so it does save me a few extra minutes of trying to find his light in the dark and I can't find the wire. It automatically goes on at 5:30 and it goes off around 7:30. It is the best purchase I've ever made. I plan to get one for this fish tank as well. I just don't have the proper outlet for it yet. But a fish tank timer light is phenomenal, especially if you're out of town. I have taken my fish home with me a few times since I'm in college, and I've left his tank here running. So having the light, sure that it gets the proper hours of daylight so you don't come back to a bunch of either algae or dead plants, basically. Obviously, fish keeping comes with time and experience, so the more you do it, the more you're going to learn. I think that is it for my tips and things that I learned while having a betta fish. If you guys want a part 2, I'm sure I could do a part 2. Let me know. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can see more videos like this. Bye!